I was in the middle of loading my car, 2 bags, a casserole dish I'd promised myself I wouldn't bring but brought anyway, and a cardboard box of books I'd been meaning to read since March, when my phone buzzed on the hood. It was my daughter. "Mom, just so you know, I already told everyone Christmas dinner is at your place this year. 40 people. I've got it all organized. You just need to cook." I stood there in the driveway with a bag of potatoes in one hand and my phone in the other, and I read that message 3 times. Then I typed back, "That's going to be tricky, sweetheart. I'm leaving for Spruce Lake this afternoon, and I won't be back until the 27th. You might want to look into a caterer." I put the phone in my pocket, loaded the potatoes, and got in the car. I want to tell you something about that moment. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't slam a door or cry or sit at the kitchen table feeling sorry for myself. I just drove. Highway 11 North, windows cracked, radio on, and the particular kind of quiet that only comes when you've finally stopped waiting for someone to treat you the way you deserve. I'm 64 years old. I have 1 daughter. Her name is Renee. And for the better part of a decade, I have been learning slowly, sometimes painfully, that love and obligation are not the same thing, even when someone you love insists that they are. Let me back up. My husband, Leonard, passed away 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and unfair, the way it always is. We'd been married 31 years, built a house together in Barrie, raised Renee in that house, watched her leave it, welcomed her back twice when things went sideways in her 20s. After Leonard died, it was just me in that house. 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard with the vegetable garden. Leonard had kept going every summer. Too much space for one person, too much quiet. Renee called me about a year after the funeral. She and her husband, Trevor, were having some financial trouble. Nothing catastrophic, she said. Just tight. Just temporary. Trevor's contracting business had slowed down over the winter. They had 2 kids in school. Daycare costs were brutal. She said they'd need maybe 6 months to get back on their feet. I said, "Yes, of course. You say yes. She's my daughter. Those are my grandchildren." I told them they could have the main floor. I'd take the basement suite, which Leonard had finished beautifully, and we'd figure it out as we went. That was 4 years ago. What started as 6 months became 8, became a year, became 2, became the kind of arrangement nobody talks about directly, but everyone quietly reorganizes their life around. Trevor's business did recover eventually. They were no longer tight, but they were also no longer in any particular hurry to leave. And if I'm honest with myself, let it go on because I was lonely, because I loved my grandchildren, and because it was easier than having the conversation. But easier is its own kind of slow erosion. I want to be clear about Trevor. He's not a bad man. He's not cruel. He's just the kind of person who moves through the world assuming that things will arrange themselves for his convenience, and that other people will quietly do the arranging. He never once paid rent. Not a cent. They covered some groceries occasionally, fixed the eavesdrows one summer, and Trevor once power washed the driveway like he deserved a medal for it. But the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the hydro, all of mine. Renee, for her part, genuinely believed she was helping me. That's the part that was hardest to hold. She wasn't pretending. She really believed that having them there was doing me a favor. She'd say things like, "You'd rattle around in here alone, Mom," or "It's good for the kids to be close to their grandmother." And I never quite knew how to explain that rattling around alone was sometimes exactly what I needed. The Christmas message wasn't the first time she'd made plans on my behalf without asking. There was the summer barbecue she'd announced to the whole neighborhood, the birthday dinner she'd organized in my dining room for Trevor's parents and 17 of their closest friends. The weekend she'd told my grandchildren they could have a puppy because Grandma's yard is huge. That last one still makes me laugh, actually. I never did end up with a puppy, but it was close. Each time, I'd go along with it. I'd cook, I'd smile, I'd clear up afterward, and then I'd lie awake at 3 in the morning with a tight feeling in my chest that I didn't have a good word for yet. But the Christmas message was different, and not just because of the timing. 3 months before she sent it, I'd had a quiet conversation with a lawyer. Her name was Susan. an estate lawyer in Barrie. I'd been seeing about updating my will after Leonard's death. When I explained the living situation, 4 years, no rent, no end date, 2 adults and 2 children essentially occupying my home, she got a very particular expression on her face. Not judgmental, just careful. She asked me a few questions. Had they contributed to the mortgage? Had we put anything in writing? Did they know whose name the title was in? Then she told me that under Ontario law, a family member living in a property for an extended period, depending on the circumstances, could potentially claim certain rights. Not ownership, nothing that dramatic, but the kind of entanglement that makes things complicated when you eventually want to sell or refinance or simply reclaim your own home. I thought about that for 6 weeks before I went back to see her. What I did next, I did very quietly. I updated my will, which I'd been meaning to do anyway. I also put my house into a family trust, one that named my 2 grandchildren, Jonah and Petra, as the eventual beneficiaries. It was their grandfather's house in the end. It felt right that it would become theirs. I told no one. Not Renee, not my sister out in Kelowna, not my neighbor Doris, who knew everything about everyone on our street. I just did it, signed the papers, drove home, and made myself a cup of tea. That was 6 weeks before the Christmas message. So when I read, "You just need to cook on my phone in the driveway," there was a layer to my calm that Renee didn't know about yet. I drove to Spruce Lake. It's a small place, a cabin that my brother and I inherited from our parents. Nothing fancy, propane heat and a wood stove and a dock that needs replanking every few years. I've been going there in December since I was a child. It smells like wood smoke and cold air and the particular kind of stillness that only exists when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground and the nearest Tim Hortons is 40 minutes away. It's the only place I've ever been where time moves at the right speed. My phone started up about 20 minutes outside of Barrie. First, it was Renee again. "Mom, I'm serious. Everyone's expecting this. I already sent a group message to the whole family." Then another, "Can you at least call me when you get a chance?" Then a third, which arrived while I was stopped at a gas station in Aurelia. "Trevor says we can handle the setup and cleanup. You just need to do the food." I bought a coffee, I got back in the car, and I kept driving. My brother Garth called when I was about 10 minutes from the cabin. He lives in Sudbury, and we talk every couple of weeks, mostly about nothing important: hockey, the price of firewood, whether our cousin's new restaurant was going to make it. He'd gotten the family message Renee had sent. He wasn't surprised, exactly, but he sounded careful. "She told everyone it was settled," he said. "It's not settled," I said. There was a pause, then, "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to the cabin," I said. "I'll figure out the rest when I get there." When I arrived, I unloaded the car, got the wood stove going, and sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and my phone. The group message Renee had sent was something else. She'd included Leonard's sister, my brother, 3 of her aunts on Trevor's side, a couple of her friends from university who'd apparently become part of the family without my noticing. And this is the part that I kept coming back to. Trevor's mother, Connie. Connie and I have always been polite to each other. We are what you might call Christmas and birthdays close. She's not unkind. But she has a very firm sense of what a family looks like and what a grandmother's role in that family ought to be. And she'd been copied on this message as though it were an invitation. As though it were already decided. I made a cup of tea I didn't drink. I stared at the lake through the window. There was a pair of mergansers out on the open water near the dock, the only spot that hadn't iced over yet. I watched them for a while. Then my phone rang again. It wasn't Renee. It was Connie. I let it ring twice before I answered. "Helen," she said. "That's me, Helen Marsh. I just wanted to make sure you got Renee's message. We're also looking forward to it." I told my sister she's going to drive up from Hamilton. I was quiet for just a moment, just long enough. "Connie," I said, "I appreciate you calling. I have to be honest with you. I'm actually at the cabin until after Christmas." I didn't know Renee was sending that message until after she'd sent it. There was a silence on her end that had a very specific shape to it. "Oh," she said. "Yes," I said. "I think there may have been some miscommunication. I'd suggest giving Renee a call." We said goodbye very pleasantly. I hung up and sat back down at the kitchen table. Then Renee called. She was not yelling, exactly. Renee never yells. She has a way of getting very precise and measured when she's upset, which somehow makes it worse. She said she couldn't understand how I could do this to the family. She said people had already made arrangements, that her aunt was flying in from Fredericton, that Connie's sister was coming from Hamilton. She said I was being selfish. That word landed somewhere specific in my chest, not because it hurt in the way she meant it to, but because I recognized it as something I'd been afraid of my whole life, being called selfish for wanting anything for myself. Renee, I said, I love you, but I didn't agree to host 40 people for Christmas. You made that decision without asking me and then announced it as a fact. That's not the same thing. You always do this, she said. You agree to things and then back out. I didn't agree to this one, I said. You could have said no when I told you. You didn't tell me, sweetheart. You informed me. After the fact, via a group message that included people I barely know. She went quiet. Then she said, Trevor says he'll do all the prep work, all the decorating. You just have to be there and cook. I looked out at the lake. The mergansers were gone. I'm going to spend Christmas at Spruce Lake, I said. You're welcome to come up on the 27th when I'm back, and we can celebrate then. I'll make a nice dinner for the immediate family. She hung up. I turned off my phone ringer, made another cup of tea that I actually drank this time, and read about 40 pages of the novel I'd been carrying around since March. That night, I slept better than I had in months. What happened over the next 4 days, I knew was happening even though I wasn't there for it. The phone messages I'd see when I checked in each evening were enough to piece it together. There was a family reshuffling happening, a reconfiguration of plans, a certain amount of awkwardness as Renee had to call people and explain that things had changed. Garth texted me. She called me. You okay? I texted back, more okay than I've been in a while. He sent a thumbs up and I went back to my book. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. Renee called again. This time, her voice was different. Not the precise, measured version, the real one. The one I'd known since she was 8 years old and had scraped both her knees coming off her bike and was trying not to cry. Mom, she said, I need to tell you something. I waited. Trevor's been talking to someone, she said. A realtor. I found some paperwork. He's been asking about what the house would sell for. Our house. He told me it was just curiosity, but she stopped. Is the house in your name? Just your name? I took a breath. Yes, I said. It's in my name. Trevor was telling people it was ours, she said. Not legally. He never said legally. But the way he talked about it. At Thanksgiving at his parents' place, he told his dad that we'd probably sell the place in a couple of years once the market went back up. He said it like. She stopped again. Like it was already decided, I said. Yes, she said. Very quietly, I had a choice in that moment. I could have said what I'd done with the trust. I could have laid out the whole careful, quiet thing I'd built over the previous weeks. But I didn't, not yet. What I said was this. Renee, the house belongs to me. I've never suggested otherwise, have I? No, she said. Your father and I built it together. And I've made arrangements for what happens to it when I'm gone. Arrangements that are already signed and filed. It's not a decision anyone else needs to be involved in. I heard her breathing. Then, Trevor's going to be upset. That's between you and Trevor, I said. What came next was not a clean resolution. Real life rarely is. Renee and I talked for a long time. Longer than we'd talked in years, really. And some of it was hard. She cried. I cried a bit too, though I waited until we'd hung up to do it properly. She told me things about her marriage that I'd suspected but never had confirmed. And I told her things about the last 4 years that I'd been carrying around and hadn't known how to say. It wasn't a fight. It was a conversation that was long overdue. 2 days later, I drove back to Barrie. When I pulled into the driveway, Trevor's truck was gone. Renee met me at the door. She told me she'd had a serious conversation with him. She'd told him that she knew he'd been talking to the realtor. She'd told him that the house was not theirs to sell, had never been theirs to sell, and that she needed him to understand the difference between generosity and ownership. I don't know exactly how that conversation went. I wasn't there for it. but Renee looked like someone who'd put something down that had been heavy for a long time. We sat in my kitchen and I made us both tea, actually finished this time, and I told her about the trust. She was quiet for a long time after. Jonah and Petra, she finally said. Yes, I said. It's their grandfather's house. It should be theirs. She nodded. She didn't argue. And then she said something that I think about still. I think I was afraid that if I didn't hold on to everything, I'd lose it all, even when it wasn't mine to hold. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. I don't think people are simply villains or heroes in the situations that shape them. Renee had made choices I didn't agree with, and she'd let Trevor's assumptions become her own in ways she was only beginning to understand. Trevor had treated my generosity as a resource to be managed. But the person I had to answer for, in the end, was me, and what I'd allowed to continue by saying nothing for 4 years. The conversation we had that afternoon in my kitchen was the first real one we'd had in longer than I want to admit. Not the surface ones, about the kids, about the weather, about what we were having for dinner. The kind where you say the thing you've been not saying. We did celebrate Christmas, eventually. Renee and the kids came up to Spruce Lake on the 28th, just the 4 of us. Jonah caught a small pike off the dock and spent the better part of an hour telling me about the fight it put up. Petra made paper snowflakes and taped them to the cabin windows until she'd run out of tape. We made a big pot of chili and played cards until the kids fell asleep on the couch. Trevor did not come. I don't know yet what's going to happen with Renee's marriage, or with the living arrangements, or with any of the practical things that still have to be sorted out. Those conversations are ahead of us still. But I know what happened on that dock in November when I turned off my car and went inside and made a different choice than I'd been making for 4 years. I stopped arranging myself around other people's convenience. There were 40 people who were expecting a Christmas dinner in my house, cooked by my hands, in a celebration I hadn't agreed to host. And what I did, calmly, without drama, without a speech, was go to Spruce Lake and watch the mergansers and read my book and sleep well. That's the whole of it. I kept my grandchildren. I kept my house. I kept myself. And for the first time in a long time, I came back home feeling like it was mine.